cava right there, or the IVC. And what's real neat is right there I can see a nerve. So the cream on it is a nerve, which we'll talk about next week. That nerve is called the phrenic nerve that runs onto the diaphragm right there. So we'll hold on to that for next week. Alright? Now I work on the left-hand side, so I tilt all the organs over to the right-hand side. Right, and there is my inferior vena cava right there, running all the way down. Now notice right here, folks, this is the mesentery right here, and all of this cream right here are going to be branches of my autonomic nervous system, sympathetic or parasympathetic. Alright, and we will actually point out a couple of structures of the sympathetic fibers today. So all of those cream right there, these threads, are all of these nerves right here in my abdominal pelvic cavity. Right, either a sympathetic or a parasympathetic. Most times sympathetic was, remember down here, it is going to be the branch of the vagus, that is the parasympathetic. Alright? And notice what we do is we're just going to keep cleaning all the way down till it forms what letter? Y into my lower limbs. Alright, so I'm going to start up here, and I don't see my adrenal gland. Oh, okay, I see it, but I think I've just destroyed it. So there. So on my left hand side, not all that clear, folks. So let's go to the right hand side. Now that is the kidney right there. And notice the kidney is always going to have a layer of fat around it. Adipose. And what is the function of adipose around my kidneys? The main function there. Protective function. Alright, so there now, if we remember back to the endocrine system, then my adrenal gland was located right there. Alright? In the case of the kidney, in the case of the cat, notice what has happened. The adrenal gland is not there. The adrenal gland is right there. So it is a little ways away. It's actually quite a ways away from the kidney. And folks, right there is this big vein that is now draining from the adrenal gland into my inferior vena cava right there. So all of this is the gland right there. All of that's the gland right there. And that is called the adrenal lumbar vein. So you need to add that. So notice small organ, big blood vessel or big vein. Disproportionately so. Okay, and now we come back to the endocrine system / autonomic nervous system, and we can see why that nerve is so why that vein, is so disproportionately big. Right, coming off especially the adrenal medulla, because what is carried in that vein? Right? Norepinephrine. Epinephrine up to the heart. So notice quite a distance up to the heart. Quite a distance. When I'm in that fight response, I get epinephrine to all of my organs, the heart, the main one, like that. Like that. Right? Okay, so that is on the right hand side, and like I said, I think I pulled it apart on the left hand side already. See it over here. Notice there's the diaphragm right there, folks. So as soon as I pass the diaphragm, I'm going to look for the adrenal gland, which I think it's this, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, but anyway, let's continue on here. So let me clean this up here. And notice this kidney is dyed blue because what happened was there's a lot of blue paint now, the dye that has actually leaked into the kidneys, both of my kidneys, hence stained blue. Alright? Then we see that the main vein right here draining into or coming out of the kidney is the renal vein. Right? The renal pertaining to the kidney. Now, what we're going to see on many of the cats, there's actually going to be more than one renal vein draining out of the kidney. And there you can actually see the two parts of it. So there we have two of them. Sometimes there may be three right there. So there's two of them that drain into. So coming out will be two and then they'll drain into one. Some cats will have three. Now let me check. Your cat is unusual. There may be a couple of extra ones right there. Right? So that's the renal vein. Right, so there's the renal vein. Now notice renal vein draining from the kidney into that. Now that vein right there, folks, is carrying deoxygenated blood, but cleaned blood. So what would be one product that is absent coming out of the kidney right there? Okay. Yeah, urea, or in the exam so far that we talked about, would be what compound that will be left behind there? Bilirubin. And in fact, there's the artery that we'll talk about later on, because that now will be oxygenated blood, but metabolic waste-laden blood. Yes? All right? And then there's my inferior vena cava. Now, folks, I've got a female that is in the beginning of pregnancy. Right? And again, like I said, this is so soft, we're not going to see anything, but there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this fetus, if she was going to continue living, then there were going to be 8 little offspring in her body, her uterus, right there. Alright? Now, this is what I want us to see right here. Here's the ovary. So when we get to the reproductive system, we'll talk about there's the ovary. And there, folks, is a pretty distended ovarian vein. Now notice there's it right there. So I start off first calling it the genital vein. Genital just pertaining to reproduction. So we start off always saying, okay, genital vein. Then, because this is a female, now what do I call the genital vein? Becomes female, ovarian. If it's a male, then it's going to come out of here, then it's going to be running all the way up, and that's going to be testicular. Right? Now, if you have a cat that is not pregnant, chances are this blood vessel isn't going to be as big as that. Right? So that is my renal vein right there. And on the left-hand side, the ovarian vein drains from the ovary into the left renal vein right there, on the left-hand side. But notice what happens on the right-hand side. You have your diagram, notice where does that ovarian vein drain into on the right-hand side. And there we can see it. Let's see if I can tilt this over here, everything over to this side. So there is the renal vein right there. So there is the right renal vein right there. And there is the right ovarian vein right there. So where does the right ovarian vein drain into? Not the renal vein, but into the inferior vena cava. So notice, very common. Notice they're both the same veins, but we see this happening in many parts of the body, where my left ovarian vein drains into my renal vein up there, but my right ovarian vein drains into the inferior vena cava. Just quirks, and it's fine. They work just fine. They work just fine. Right? Then there's my inferior vena cava. And my inferior vena cava is working fine. There's only one of them. Every so often, folks, what will happen is we will actually have two inferior vena cavas like that, extending way up. So we'll actually see two of them. Right? So I'll come around, I check. Hopefully we may have one or two cats that actually has a double inferior vena cava below the kidneys. All right?
Weird. Why would they have two?
It's just that what happens is, notice they're supposed to They're going to flow from the iliacs, and they're supposed to join way down in the pelvic girdle, but sometimes they'll just continue running like that. And they're fine, the cats are fine. Okay? Okay, so let's see what do we have here now, folks. So there is my inferior vena cava, and it continues, and then what we see is we see a split, a Y split right there, which we can actually see nicely on this cat. Now, we're going to work around these splits. We're not going to cut anything down there, because we still want to keep these for the everything intact for the reproductive system. So there I can see how it's splitting right there into a left and a right side, right there. And notice what happens. The right side is coming from my right leg. The left one is coming from my left leg.